So good morning and welcome to UCEA YouTube Live. This is Margaret Thornton, Graduate Research Assistant and Doctoral Student at UCEA Headquarters at the University of Virginia. And I am here today to interview Dr. Sheneka M Williams as part of her candidacy for the UCEA Executive Committee. Today's listeners will be hearing from Sheneka M Williams, Associate Professor in the Department of Lifelong Education, Administration, and Policy at the University of Georgia. My boyfriend wants me to say, go Dogs. Her research interests include students' access to educational opportunity, school community relations, and school leadership in rural areas. So welcome to Dr. Williams, and we will begin with a few questions. So why don't you start by telling us about your background and your work as it relates to UCEA's mission and goals?
So I started my career back in 1996 as a high school social studies teacher. And while I was teaching, I got my master's from the University of Alabama and actually received my leadership certificate with that master's. So at that time, I had the licensure to become a principal. And I actually entered the classroom thinking that I'd one day be a principal and maybe even a school superintendent. So that route changed when I decided to go to grad school at Vanderbilt. I went to Peabody. I graduated from there in 2007. But I still had a keen interest in schools and leaders in schools and how they might be able to make a difference in the lives of children. And so from that, I landed at the University of Georgia, where I became plenum rep about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But I also, with Ed Fuller, became a policy associate. And so working with UCEA over the years, I love the work that we do with leadership preparation and also trying to have a voice in policy and how policy shapes leader prep and how leaders work in schools. So that is my background with UCEA. My own research infuses policy and leadership. And so one of the reasons I'm interested in being on the EC is because I have a keen interest in how both connect, right? I think oftentimes in our local programs at our universities, there's tension between policy and leadership, but I see them working together. I think if leaders know more about policy, they become better at what they do. And I think if policy leaders listen to school leaders, they might be able to think about how to develop policies that might better support them in their work. And so I consider myself a bridge scholar, and I'd like to bring that to the executive committee as UCEA, of course, is turning the pages of where it's going to go directionally.
Great. That's all really interesting, and I think you're onto something with this melding of policy and leadership. And you also mentioned you've served for several years as a plenary session representative. Tell us a little bit more about your engagement in UCEA's governance.
Oh, wow. So being on the plenum, gosh, I can't even remember, but I am also part of a NIC headed by David Eddie Spicer, and we're looking at curriculum coherence. And that has been very useful to help me think about with our program, how can we develop curriculum for our leader preparation programs to help develop, of course, stronger principles as we send them out. So that's one area of work I've done with UCEA. Being a policy associate, Ed and I oversaw some graduate students. They're now faculty at places, but when ESSA was first rolled out, we did this 50-state study about ESSA plans and how those plans might be developed and implemented across the different states. So that's also some work I've done with UCEA. At the time, we led a visit on the Hill. I think we did 2 visits on the Hill that I was a part of. Again, trying to talk to staffers about the importance of that leadership and how we really wanted and needed a seat at the table. Here in the state of Georgia, and this isn't directly tied with UCEA, but at Georgia, we were part of the quality measures team, again, for some more leader preparation work. But I know that that UCEA and the Wallace Foundation have a close relationship, and some of that quality measures work was funded by the Wallace Foundation. So I would say over the past 4 or 5 years, other than being plenum rep, I've also been a policy associate, and I've helped author reports, lead days on the Hill, and those are the types of things I've been involved in. I'm a former Clark Scholar from a long time ago with UCEA. So I just believe in the work that UCEA does in preparing the next group of educational scholars, but also in how we can develop the next group of ed leaders as practitioners.
Absolutely. Organizing the Clark seminar is one of my responsibilities as a graduate assistant here at HQ. And so it's always fun to meet alumni of that program.
Yes, it was very good experience.
So we'll change a little bit, and I'd love to hear you discuss with us your scholarship, research projects, teaching, service that you've done that can inform the work of UCEA, particularly the work of the executive committee.
So my newer work, post-tenure, has had a huge focus on rural education. When you asked about my background earlier, I'm from small town Alabama. Not from the Black Belt area of Alabama, but basically one county over. And I think one thing I'd like to bring to the EC is how do we think about leader prep pipelines across contexts, urban, suburban, and rural. And I have to admit, yes, I am in some ways a cheerleader for rural, because I think oftentimes because of the smaller populations and the geographic isolation, those schools don't sometimes get what they need. And I understand there's distance and there's difficulty with technology, but those students have a right to educational opportunities, right? And so one thing I'd be interested in seeing us do, like we've done with some of the urban areas, is try to maybe have some prep programs, some pipelines, and see if we can, transfer some of that work to that context, because those leaders need us. And I think they're so often overlooked, even in the literature, right? So when I'm trying to write about rural school leadership, it's very hard to even find good peer-reviewed work to cite and to build a literature base from. Now, I do know that we have some scholars who are doing some good work and coming along with that. But one of the things I'd like to bring to the EC is for us to think a little bit broader about ed leadership. And I think we have done that, but I want us to continue that conversation, because I think about 20% of America's school population is educated in rural areas. And I think with our universities, some of them not being in complete urban areas, we have some work to do. And I'd like to play a role in extending our reach.
That sounds great. I grew up in Appalachia, so I'm always love when people talk about rural schools. That's really important and overlooked. So we're on our last question. Our time is brief today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. So you can get back to your day, but I'm hoping that you can share the reasons why you've chosen to run for the UCEA Executive Committee, and a little bit more about your vision for the future of UCEA.
I decided to run, just to be completely honest, because I was asked. I was asked, I think last year, and I said no, because I didn't think the time was right. And I don't know if the time is ever right, right? But what I do know is that I know with the change in the executive director, UCEA will be in a new phase, right? And I find it very exciting to be at the cusp of whatever that new phase might be and whatever that new vision might be. I consider myself a visionary. I like to think broadly and build plans for the future. And so one of the reasons I'm running for the EC is because I'd like to bring some of my thoughts to the table, as I said earlier, on rural leadership, but also more on the praxis between leadership and policy. I think UCEA has made tremendous strides in those areas, but I also don't want to lose the momentum that we've built. I think that is very important. I think having a seat at the table in state legislatures, and even more so nationally, and having a voice in Washington, all of that matters, particularly at this time we are in currently in education in America as a whole. So with my research on rural, my focus on students of color, particularly African American students, I think that this is a time for me to lend my voice, lend my hand, and that is why I'm seeking nomination to the EC.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and thoughtful responses, Dr. Williams. This interview will be archived on the UCEA YouTube channel. Listeners can access or share the interview at any time. We'll also encourage listeners to post comments and questions on this interview in the comments on the UCEA YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Williams. Do you have any further questions or anything else I can provide?
Actually, I do not. I guess in past years, everything has been voted on at the plenum, right?
Yes.
And so you'll find out then if you're on. So no, I don't have any other questions. I see this as an opportunity to serve. And if given that opportunity, I plan to do just that. And if I'm not given that opportunity, that just simply means this is not the time.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Houston next week. It'll be
All right.
really
I'll see you in another week or so.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.